Anomaly species, Desolivore. Risk profile, cognitohazardous. Threat level, societal. Description. The Desolivore is a humanoid creature that feeds on human emotions, primarily loneliness and associated feelings like jealousy. To the naked eye and from far away, it resembles a slim human figure with long, shimmering black hair. However, as one gets closer, they begin to recognize something isn't quite right. Its eyes are sunken into its skull with deep, dark circles around them. Wrinkles crease the edges of its eyelids, giving them a weathered, tired appearance. Below this, the creature lacks a nose, instead having two holes where the skull would connect to the nasal cartilage. The mouth and gums of this creature are jet black, and the gum line retracts from the teeth, showing the results of dental decay, a skeletal mouth structure exposing the bloody, gangrenous roots of the teeth. The shine from the hair is revealed to be from a coating of viscous mucus. Way more scary than hot now, right? No? What's wrong with you? This creature is skilled at detecting the signs of loneliness. A depressive stance, fear of interaction, encyclopedic knowledge about anime. This entity will sit back and examine the environment for an extended period of time. It will single out the most vulnerable individual and approach them when they are alone. The Desolivore will try to get the victim away from populated areas as quickly as possible to begin its feeding process. It will flirt with its intended host, suggesting they spend some time together privately. It has a cognitohazardous hold over whoever it targets, transforming the monster's horrific visage into one that looks stunning to the victim. The entity contorts the viewer's perception to make them believe that they are looking at the most beautiful person they ever laid eyes on. Its cognitohazardous beauty effect in this manner rivals even that of 14 shots of Henny in a dimly lit bar. The gender and overall appearance will be warped to what the individual is attracted to, but it always somewhat resembles roughly the same being. The creature will mimic aspects of the victim's personality, aesthetics, values, anything that would make them look like an ideal partner. If the person is lonely because they lost someone, be it because of death or otherwise, the creature will take the form of those they had lost. Those it's after are none the wiser.
Rose, is it really you? I thought you passed away in that exploding milk carton opening accident that happened right after you said you didn't love me anymore.
Yes, well, I've decided that I do love you, and also that I'm not dead anymore.
I knew you would!
TLDR, red flags just look pink through rose-tinted glasses. Its goal is to isolate the individual and destroy the mental faculties holding their sanity together, using its cognitohazardous powers to keep them in some sort of mind prison. Once it gets the victim alone, it kisses them. The host's eyes roll back into their head, and they collapse. The victim's consciousness seemingly phases into a black void of nothing. Being fed upon by a Desolivore is similar to being in solitary confinement, except you don't even have the bearings of your own body. The Desolivore will then hide this body, and return routinely when the suffering and loneliness has reached a breaking point, to suck it out with another monstrous mouth-to-mouth. Every time I do that, I'm afraid I'm gonna choke on my own spit. While a host can be fed on by a Desolivore for an extended period of time without dying, most individuals go completely insane after a few days of uninterrupted feeding. This creature is not only insidious, but also intelligent. In recent years, with the rise of what has been branded the Loneliness Industrial Complex, this entity has been able to magnify its power significantly. It's taken to using dating apps as lures. I mean, Tinder was already a monstrous entity designed to prey on the desperation of lonely individuals, but now they got a mascot. I love when companies do this because I can think of Tony the Tiger rather than be sad about how my decisions make me fat. This creature has perfected its hunting strategy in the modern world, using a catfish strategy to appeal to whatever customizable flavor of loneliness the individual has. If the victim is an antisocial and horny League of Legends player, they go with hooker dressed as anime girl. If the victim is a woman who feels like her only option is being used by fuckboys or nagged by nice guys, they'll be an unattainable man who somehow was already completely catered to their dreams even though they've never met, and has no commitment problems at all. Neither the John nor the prostitute, the Coomer nor the cam girl, the two girls nor the one cup are safe from the Desolivore. The Desolivore cares not for where they fall in this emotional ecosystem. It cares for what it can suck out of them. Come, loneliness. If the victim somehow gets away from this entity without completely losing their mind, they'll be scarred for the rest of their life. For some reason, even though they know exactly what happened, they miss the very entity that almost destroyed them. They know they shouldn't. They know that returning to it would be certain death. The thing is, even though it isn't real, just the feeding practices of this anomaly still feels like the most unnaturally powerful connection they've ever felt to anything. Over time, this cognitohazard will fade, but many return back to the desolivore, fully knowing and accepting their fate. Once the cognitohazardous effects phase, the scars can still affect future relationships, which is tragic, because genuine human connection is the one way to slowly heal the wounds left by this creature. Anyways, this little critter has nothing to do with any problems, be they individual or societal. I actually have never felt lonely before in my whole life. If you feel lonely sometimes, that's bad, and you should be ashamed of it because it's unnatural. And it's not something everyone experiences, and that's completely normal. Only your dumb ass.
Most gruesome case yet. Same style of trophy as the other 3 victims. Made out of her skin, too. I warn you, sir. This won't be easy to see. Investigators have recently found several artifacts relating to what appears to be an active crime scene. These artifacts resemble regular Furbies, except with all non-mechanical components swapped out for human body parts. These flesh Furbies, or flesh bees / skin bees, as they have now been dubbed, have been popping up all over London. These flesh bees emanate a stench of decay, both because they're actively rotting, and also because there's usually a decomposing body with a bunch of pieces nearby. Looks like Jack the Ripper and Ed Gein had a baby with a Gen Z sense of humor. In cases where the victim is not easily located nearby, DNA testing of these flesh bees have revealed that these pieces were taken from individuals that have been declared missing shortly beforehand. Look on the bright side. We know they're not missing anymore. The first skin bee found was assembled using human skin, hair, and teeth, and had weird little Furby feet made out of fingers. Other variations of these horrific children's toy recreations have been documented containing human eyes, ears, toes, as well as some seemingly random internal organs as well. In some instances, flesh bees were found constructed entirely of scrotums, labia, and genitalia. For some reason, these ones sold out the quickest on my murder memorabilia site that I'm totally not stealing Furbies to sell them on. These flesh bees still contain the mechanical parts that standard issue Furbies come out of the factory with, and thus are entirely functional. They have some standard Furby behavior, as well as some unexplainable quirks. For instance, these skin bees have new sayings that I highly doubt a board of executives approved, such as, "The pain! It is unending! Please don't kill me, I have a family." Why the fuck am I a Furby? The flesh bees can seemingly quote memories from their past life. The most common recalled memory among these flesh bees is their brutal end. Dude, it was like this morning. Get over it. Some theorize that both the consciousness and soul of the victim has been trapped inside these children's toys. And by some, I mean me. The skin bees have also displayed disturbing behavior. Among other things, flesh bees have been noted following people around, hiding and staring at people for extended periods of time until discovered, and even displaying violent tendencies. Most often, they will latch down on the appendage of a victim and increase the tension until said digit is severed. This was the end of the infamous self-appointed Furby fucker. With any situation like this, there's a lot of unanswered questions. First of all, what the actual fuck? Is this perhaps a serial killer trying to get out some sort of Hasbro-themed message? Or maybe it's some dirty witch lady trying to attempt an occult Furby ritual. These theories were stupid enough on their own, but something was about to happen to disprove them entirely. In the coming weeks, these flesh bees randomly appeared on store shelves, replacing all their non-human organ-made counterparts. The same day that this happened in the brick-and-mortar establishments, suddenly, all regular Furbies from online retailers were replaced by the haphazardly created monstrosities. Not only that, but all previously purchased Furbies were replaced with their horrific counterparts as well, suggesting that we're dealing with more than just a serial killer. I mean, like, probably. I know the amount of effort it takes to turn multiple human corpses into Furbies is likely immense, but I don't think that makes them capable of something this grand of scale. No, we're dealing with an anomalous threat to humanity. And that means someone is f***ing with my turf again! There's only one being powerful enough to do something like this. We can't just let this happen, Amoeba. We have to do what we should have done in the first place. Take on the biggest threat to mankind.
Anomaly species, Dynastis adipophagus. Threat level, moderate. Description: the Dynastis adipophagus, or gutsucker as it's commonly known, is a large carnivorous animal with both insectoid and mammalian traits. This creature is most commonly described by eyewitnesses as a hybrid of a grub, a beetle, and an obese man. The animal gets its name from its unique feeding pattern. It has a proboscis that it uses to suck fat from under its prey's skin. Each time it does, it leaves a little star-shaped scar on its prey. The gutsucker feeds on all animals that can deposit fat storages in their body. However, it displays an apparent preference for individuals with a high adipose tissue content. The creature begins its life as a small worm-like parasite inside of a host, and when it grows large enough, it eats its way out of its host and switches to a different hunting strategy. This entity creates a large nest underground. It then secretes pheromones that disable higher thinking and makes anyone affected by them intensely pursue carnal desires. This affects most animals the same way, but individual people vary differently. Human psychology is incredibly complex, and humans are motivated by a litany of different stimuli. Some people respond to these pheromones sexually, propositioning anyone or anything indiscriminately to do any number of disgusting acts that I can't describe on YouTube, or whatever fucking platform you see this on. Some people go on drug benders that can last for weeks, taking anything they can get their hands on, and doing anything to get more. Some people feel an otherworldly compulsion to consume sugar, salt, and fat, regardless of the source. These are the targets of the adipophagus. Once the animal has a target in its sights, it will expel a trail of sucrose, adipose, and electrolytes with an intense greasy smell. The more food-motivated in nature will voraciously consume this calorically dense poop stuff, following the creature back into its lair. Nature is just so beautiful sometimes. I mean, not right now. This makes me want to press glass into my eye, but I don't know, go shake a beehive or something. The creature will leave them there and enter a secondary hunting period, consuming small animals, plants, and insects voraciously like a filter feeder to produce their greasy nutrient paste. It vomits this paste into the mouths of its prey upon returning, and feeds off them later after the sludge digests and turns to fat on their body. While the feeding process of this creature is not necessarily lethal immediately, after a while of forced beetle liposuction, this prey either dies from starvation if the gutsucker is unsuccessful in secondary hunting, or succumbs to infections in the wounds made by the proboscis. Another infected hole. That right there is why you use a condom. I mean, I don't, but you should. This creature was first found in... This area is quite poor and was experiencing an intense famine. They had no obese people, so the population of these creatures was low, bordering on endangered, and they were sparsely dotted around the landscape. This all changed on an aid journey from America, in which several of the participants were quite large. The bigger of the group went missing on an expedition to bring relief to a township that was affected most severely by the famine. Many of them never returned, all except for one, who came back notably slimmer than when he had left. The natives said that the charity workers were taken by a local legend that kidnapped the chief when he began hoarding food, a creature described by the townspeople as a mix between a commonly found native insect larva and an American man. Almost as if a show of intelligence, instead of keeping all of the victims it acquired in its nest, it set one free after laying eggs in the victim's remaining adipose. The creature knew that wherever these people came from, there must be more like them. The eggs matured into larvae inside the host system on the man's way back to America, and upon landing, they burrowed out of the host's now slimmer tummy and scattered into the city. This same man then took a sponsorship from a sandwich company and went to jail for sex crimes. For these critters, they had stumbled into the promised land, Wisconsin. The creatures quickly grew in size, sucking the fat of sleeping individuals until they were large enough to begin building nests. In a land of excess for them, these animals displayed a behavior that was never before seen in their species. They began to cooperate, and many grouped up, creating one large nest between them, a hive. At first, these creatures were disruptive, as authorities noticed formerly obese people turning up dead as a bunch of shriveled up juice box skeletons. Eventually, the Bureau of Anomalous Containment put a tracker on an agent that they had been force-feeding exclusively McDonald's 6 times a day for months for a completely separate reason. They assigned him to patrol a hotspot for these missing individuals. Upon tracking his body, they seized 10 of these creatures, burned their nest, and put an invasive species kill order out on them. The Bureau didn't manage to expunge all of these creatures, nor information about them, because they suck. I mean, I'm a constantly high idiot and they couldn't even trap me. Eventually, these creatures were quote-unquote discovered by the scientific community, and were given their own species designation, despite how weird and gross they were. Humanity, as they always do, found a way to get their bag with this weird critter.
Take your fitness to the next level with the premier echelon experience at Dynaslim. No longer do you have to choose between a life of decadence and your dream body. With our patented system, you can have both.
Do you like having sex with supermodels as much as you like eating hot chips and not moving? Who doesn't? Come on down to Ed's Gutsuckers, where our guarantee is you're satisfied for your fat back.
Many people have stumbled upon these nests and thought of a way they could make it work for their wallets. They guide the animal's proboscis to their client's stomach and wait until they reach around 6% body fat. Then, they knock the creature out with an injection of horse tranquilizer, K-holing the fuck out of it. The creatures actually have been cooperative thus far. As for them, their needs are being entirely cared for. They have no reason to fight. And they all lived happily ever after. But weirdly, they actually kind of did this time. But not really. This is still super fucking weird and fucked up for a lot of reasons. But anyways, the end.
A newly developed anomalous parasite has recently been found in the blood of several individuals in multiple major cities of Australia. Less than 48 hours afterwards, this novel parasitic worm was discovered in almost all nations on Earth, signifying that this disease either spreads at an incredible pace or was somehow avoiding human detection for enough time to extend throughout the globe. The parasite is a roundworm, dubbed Neurophagous cognitophid, also known to the commoner as mind maggots. This worm infiltrates the human brain and drastically affects behavior. First, in simple, indirect ways, like manipulating hormones, the patient becomes more reclusive and aggressive. In the first few days of infection, this could be seen as just a bad mood, but as it progresses, the individual gets more paranoid about other people. Eventually, they avoid human contact completely, and will often take to barricading themselves in a small, dark room. At this stage, if caught, the infestation can be cured with a new medical treatment known as pulling a fucking worm out of their head. Although, this is made incredibly difficult because the individual avoids human intervention at all costs. Also disturbing about this parasitic roundworm is that upon further investigation, the organism appears to be man-made. A chimera abomination featuring the DNA of several different organisms, including parasitic roundworms, tapeworms, pinworms, flatworms, leeches, several species of annelids, and strangest of all, a series of jawless fish, most heavily the lamprey. While this screams intelligent intervention, no suspects have been identified to date. But I'm just gonna keep electrocuting random biology doctorates until I find out who did it. At first, the worm only affects behavior, causing the individual to become erratic and aggressive around people. They retreat to an isolated, damp, dark area so the infestation can progress. Slowly, the worm grows by feeding on the host's tissue, and when ready, it travels to the brain and begins to metamorphosis into an adult.
They grow so fast. I'm not crying, you're crying, fuck you.
The adult form of this parasite is more along the lines of a beetle.
After it grabsterbates from pupa, the specimen begins to consume the human brain,
resulting in even more erratic behavior. At this stage, there has never been a successful attempt at removing the parasite without killing the patient.
I mean, we got it out, but he's dead as shit, man.
The beetle then hooks into the nervous system of the host, taking the place of the brain, leaving the former human being no more. The next stage of the disease is the most unsettling so far.
And I just told you the part where a beetle eats someone's fucking brain, so that's saying something.
The beetle dislodges from the nervous system of the individual, which results in them collapsing. It travels out of the empty skull and down the spine. The visuals for this are unsettling, to say the least. An alien lump under the skin that moves with an unnerving scuttle. The beetle's legs writhe underneath the epidermis, resulting in a repeated sickening squelch of wet flesh as it travels all the way to the base of the tailbone.
From the poo hole to the brain, it lays a massive cluster of eggs.
A grotesque lump that encompasses the entirety of the spine and spinal cord.
Nature is just so beautiful sometimes. I mean, not right now. This makes me want to set fire to the entirety of Yellowstone National Park, but I don't know, watch a horse give birth or something.
After laying the eggs, the beetle returns to the empty skull cavity, and the individual reawakens.
However, they reawaken paralyzed.
For several days, the former person lays on the ground as the beetle fuses with the spinal cord, after which, the eggs begin to hatch.
Thousands of worms begin to consume the entirety of the host, other than their external features and the most vital of organs. The worms are plastic and elastic like muscle, and are capable of transmitting impulses. They use their nature to replace the entirety of the musculature and nervous system. They connect to their mother and give a more nuanced and complete control of the body to the beetle. A family that consumes a host together stays together. It is at this point that the movements and behaviors become incredibly difficult to detect as uncanny. Although, if one looks close enough at a host, they'll notice a nauseating wriggling under the skin, where the worms writhe to move the body. While this might sound horrifying, I bet $100 at least one of you finished to that sentence. The blood, saliva, urine, even the air in the lungs becomes saturated with the eggs of these creatures, making these nests a walking terminal of transmission vectors. Speaking of disease transmission vectors, what makes this parasite so threatening is that it has the capacity to spread from person to person via almost any known means. The eggs are light and hardy enough to travel on air. The parasites are right at home in almost any fluid. When introduced to a biologically active body of water like a pond, lake, or ocean, the worms will hatch, and possibly due to their lamprey ancestry, they can survive indefinitely by consuming the blood of other creatures in the water. However, they've only shown to take root in human hosts, which they actively seek the second they spring from their weird squishy frog eggs. If you thought that shit was gross and horrifying, just wait until you see the ramifications of a completed infection. Eventually, when a population has been saturated enough with these hosts, the hosts will begin to congregate. The beetles release pheromones, attracting all other worm hives in the area. The worms restructure the physiology of their hosts. The top of the skull fractures with a sickening crunch and opens from the middle of the chin like a Venus flytrap. What was once the beetle matriarch, in its extended stay fused with the host neurology. It has swollen to the size of the brain it consumed. Its limbs atrophied, and the being left was nothing more than a pulsating mass of softened exoskeleton. The worms begin to eat the skin that kept them together, dissolving the body and cradling their matriarchs to the ground slowly. The worms then carry their beetles to an isolated area en masse, devouring any living thing they come across. Once they find a suitable place, they spin a large cocoon that has a fleshy consistency, and it immediately fills with fluid. Human authorities are quick to dispatch any of these on site, as this looks, to use the scientific term, like you're absolutely fucked. Because of this shoot first, ask questions later attitude, there has never been any observed parasite activity past this. However, when human researchers examined the material from the popped flesh bubble, it looked as though a massive, undeveloped arthropod was suspended in the cocoon, almost like it was gestating. Oh boy, wow, I sure wonder what would happen if it finished gestating.
A novel pathogen has come under investigation by numerous anomalous investigatory and containment agencies. This disease, hereby dubbed sensory ischemia, is a neurovascular disorder characterized by a severe impairment of blood flow to all sensory organs, leading to the eventual atrophy and loss of these organs, and the associated senses they provide. The skin feels no touch, the eyes go dark, the ears fall deaf, the tongue loses its taste, and the nose is no longer smelly? I don't know, whatever. So you know everything you use to gauge the entirety of your reality? Imagine if that was fucking gone! Try finding the right hole now, idiot! The pestilence has been nicknamed the withering, but no one who has it knows that because they can't hear it or see it written down anymore. This pathogen not only halts blood flow to all of the sensory organs, but also to some of the accessory body parts in the immediate vicinity. The cartilage forming the nose and ears slowly turn necrotic and fall off. All the hair on the skin will go, as well as the lips and teeth. The lips and teeth themselves, not hair. There's not the hair on the lips and teeth, which you guys don't have that, right? The skin will slowly turn necrotic, becoming an alien-like rotten grayish black, until patches begin to flake off, revealing the raw flesh underneath. In most cases, after a long period of suspended circulation, the eyes will just shrivel up and fall out. This deforms the victim, resulting in a horrific visage that you'll be happy you don't have to see in the mirror. Just ignore it some more, I'm sure it'll go away. While the symptoms look incredibly distressing, the sensation of pain is lost first in every afflicted organ, so it doesn't actually even hurt. While this sounds like a blessing amongst the nightmare,
You forget that pain is the body's warning system for when something's going wrong. Like when you first touch a knife and learn things are sharp, or when you first skin your knee and learn things were rough, or when you first have an emo girl put a cigarette out on your skin and some horrible misstep in your evolution or personal development makes you ask her to do it again. This painless transition from normal person to withered husk makes it so you actually don't even know you're losing your senses until they're perceptibly far gone. This pathogen spreads solely throughout bodily fluids, so it'll be hard when you see something as sexy as that. But for your own safety, keep your folds and flaps to yourselves, folks. Despite the horrific symptoms of the disease, it is in no way inherently fatal. Victims can survive indefinitely after they lose all of their senses. In most cases, if not killed by self-mutilation, these individuals eventually go dormant and stop responding to the world, unable to perceive any of the reality around them, remaining completely still as they slowly dry out and die of dehydration. Or something goofy like that. There was a theory that the individuals went brain dead at this point, but they stuck one in an MRI machine and found out that it was even more active than the average brain. But only in the parts of the brain that light up when experiencing anguish and suffering. Goddamn, a real I have no mouth and I must scream situation. There are some individuals in this state kept alive by a family or loved ones manually via a feeding tube and an IV. It's absolutely heartbreaking. Seriously, you're bumming me out, man. Change the damn channel off this sad donation to stop the abuse of puppies commercial vibes, please. I want to go back to the horror show. Wait, my 600-pound life is on? I was thinking Cronenberg, but this is close enough for me. Despite the torture porn that is the scenario presented, upon further investigation, it appears that this disease is non-anomalous in nature. Many paranormal agencies researched the outbreak because of its unsettling nature, and found that just simple trial and error mutation did that shit. Lots of the time, nature is scarier than the lies that I tell you. Because of that, the Foundation has classified the pathogen as not its fucking problem. Don't you worry your sweet simple brains. Regular human research routes are currently in hot pursuit of a cure. This shit was scary enough for the phone apes to get their ass in gear. Let this be a lesson, amoeba. If you kill something too quickly, they'll do something about it. You gotta do it slowly, over time, like cigarettes or obesity. Behold! New animal just dropped. Who's the cutest little testament to man's great hubris? You are. Yes, you are. Like all good stories, this one started when scientists tried to make a dog-sized horse. The thought was that by creating a pony that could feasibly be kept responsibly and safely in the space available to the average household, they'd be able to appeal to the ultimate fantasy of every little girl and a certain subsection of unwashed 35-year-old men. They'd be rich! See, that was the thought anyway. The thought from one incredibly rich, short-sighted, and uneducated toy company executive fired for hosting Tupperware Arena bug fights in the break room. He'd heard that genetics were a thingy, and he'd seen that one Family Guy bit with gene splicing, so he felt pretty confident that he had enough money to throw at it that others would be convinced that he knew what he was doing. See, thing is, genetics are a little bit more complicated than dog plus horse equals dog-sized horse. That seems like something a 3-year-old that you just taught the most surface-level genetics to would say. In fact, most times, dog plus horse equals a seemingly haphazardly assembled animal struggling even only to survive. The resulting creature, rather than being just a dog-sized horse, was a monstrous amalgamation that shared traits with both dog and horse. Each one of these hybrid creatures were slightly different, but the only ones that seemed to survive past infancy had the consistent look of a horse's body and a dog's face. Many of these creatures were quite friendly, having behavioral patterns and temperament consistent with domesticated animals like horses and dogs. While this might sound like a good thing, if you've ever seen how a spooked horse or a regular chihuahua behaves, you'd know that this is far from perfect. Like the hybrid animal of a horse and a donkey, a mule, these creatures cannot produce offspring when they breed with each other. Because it's so expensive to produce the genetic hybrids in a lab, one particularly disturbed man involved with the project experimented with seeing if we could reduce this unnatural monster the natural way. Even though his experiments only resulted in dead bitches or unsatisfied horsewomen, he kinda just kept it going. Today, many people wonder if he was never a scientist in the first place and was just some guy that got sick kicks out of watching a horse fuck a dog to death. There's a lot of differences between horses and dogs. For example, horses are gentle giants, and dogs have canine teeth used for ripping and tearing meat. See where I'm going with this? So anyways, this stupid TikTok vegan decided to set these creatures that didn't come from nature into nature. Yeah, great! Exactly what we needed in the next Earth update. I just got used to fucking Jeff over here, and now I gotta dodge clip-clop wolves on the way home from the forest when I go out not burying bodies at night. Great job, idiot. I hope they eat you first. The result was an incredibly large and muscular carnivore, which quickly outcompeted every other meat eater in the ecosystem, becoming the apex predator of the environment in a matter of weeks. The resulting populations of what are now to be dubbed clip-clop wolves were actually seemingly a positive force for the ecosystem. These large predators essentially replaced the regular canine wolves that had been almost completely wiped out because of human influence. Because of this, the deer population, which had been subject to overpopulation for a series of decades, is now on a trend towards stabilization, as the clip-clop wolves pick off the old, the sick, the weak, and the stupid. Nature is just so beautiful sometimes. I mean, not right now. This isn't nature. It's an affront to nature, but I don't know, step outside for the first time in weeks. These creatures have also displayed traits that have been unprecedented in biology, as they have recently been observed producing their own offspring with the other hybrid clip-clop wolves. This has led to researchers classifying them as their own independent species, and establishing a new type of speciation. Homo domesticum. Exhibit A. Now, you're probably wondering what in God's name this unholy monstrosity is. This is what is known as a domestic. So you know how humans encountered wolves in the wild and then made them have sexy times with their own relatives to refine them for traits like Preston snouts or useless stubby legs? Then they did this for generations until we had created several different creatures that are all in varying amounts of pain, all from this one incredibly majestic animal. So imagine that, but with people. Enter the domestics. A subsection of humanity bred to different styles of monstrosity in a similar manner to how the wolf was transformed into this shivering rat creature. The domestics became this way because they have been selectively bred by another more intelligent species, resulting in some wild and wacky forms. Meet the successors. They're like humans if they were a little bit more human. And yes, they named themselves. That's the most human shit about this whole situation. That same human urge to advance, build, develop, kill, consume, multiply, but amplified to the logical extreme. Successors live in an incredibly divisive society in which no beings can agree on anything. Everything is subjective and up for debate and argument, even the simplest and stupidest of things. So you remember when everybody got mad at Mr. Beast for curing the fucking blind? That would be a normal opinion in successor society. Their morphology is also incredibly flexible, some resembling humans, and some looking more along the lines of gray aliens, or cybernetic beings. Some of these beings use technology so they never have to lift a finger, slowly getting fatter and fatter until they basically become a landmark, like in WALL-E. Some of these beings use technology for the exact opposite, to become the peak physical standard for their species. The point is, just like humans, there is a wide range of what these creatures are and do. The only difference is, the spectrum has more complications and is much wider. One day, millions of years ago, this species encountered an offshoot of humanity that somehow found themselves Mandela affecting into the same dimension as the successors. These modern-day humans found themselves on a virgin Earth-like planet. And because most of them only know how to Google porn and eat sandwiches, they were pretty fucked. On a routine voyage, the successors found humanity and saw a kindred spirit in the universe, a microcosm of what made them great. They think that humans are not only resourceful and intelligent, but also just the cutest little things. Humanity is significantly dumber than the successors, and they take full advantage of this. They adopt this population of humanity. While the domestics say that the successors kidnapped the original population, the successors tell a different story. They claim that when this happened millions of years ago, humans were helpless in this alternate dimension, and stayed close to the more intelligent successors for resources and protection. Eventually, the subservient humans began to act more like pets, similar to what happened between humans and wolves. Whatever the reason, the successors began to breed humanity to the point of monstrosity over generations. And because successors lived for so many human generations, they refined this breeding process efficiently. Some were bred for menial physical tasks. Some were bred for repetitive mental tasks. Mostly just for things none of the extra-dimensional creatures wanted to do. The really weird-looking humans come from the breeds that were bred for cuteness. The successors have the same parameters we do for cuteness. So just imagine a cartoonishly tiny human with bug eyes that don't fit in its damn head like a chihuahua, a pressed-in, barely breathable face like a pug, and stub arms and legs that don't even work. And then you got roughly what they were going for. Without further ado, let's get into what your new grandchildren look like. First and foremost, meet the Chihuahua Man. 2 giant bulbous eyes, a respiratory system that barely works because his fucking nose is an innie. Not that he needs any oxygen to do anything all that intensive with its stupid little stub legs. The Chihuahua Man is small in stature, and there's no way in hell it could have survived on its own in nature. But despite that fact, most of these little dwarves still hate and are aggressive towards everyone except their owners. The purpose of this little creature was to be bred for cuteness, and nothing else. And that's why it's so goddamn messed up. Next up, meet the Pit Man. Short, stout, and incredibly muscular. It stores fat reserves in its torso, arms, and thighs, giving an extra layer of padding over the top of its muscles. The Pit Man was bred for fighting, with huge incisors in its mouth, and thick meaty sausage-like appendages for gripping and tearing. The generations upon generations of fighting have left the Pitman scarred. The Pitman were bred over generations to be, as they say, pitted against each other in, you guessed it, a hole, or a ditch, one might say. These pitmen were bred to fight for the entertainment of the successors. The sport was banned by the successors at one point, but the breed still exists, and underground man fights still take place. Many pitmen have actually relocated into the wilds when given the chance, as their stature and strength, plus the higher intelligence needed for strategic fighting, allow them to survive independently on the outskirts of successor societies. Here we got the Long Man. These were bred to emphasize the musculature associated with the long human torso, and the complicated, lengthy musculature in the neck as well. To make this a bit more exaggerated, the breeders would also breed for features like stubbier legs, which, by comparison, would make the rest of the creature look longer. The result was this strange and abhorrent, pasta noodle-looking wiener dog man. The long men are friendly companions and just great with kids. While the long man is significantly better off than the Chihuahua man because it can actually breathe, their wonky and inefficient movement limit them incredibly, and they are therefore fully dependent on the successors. Next up on this list of abominations that I totally didn't just make up are the Sharp People. The Sharp People were selectively bred for loose skin, and because of that, they tend to look like the man version of those hairless cats, but somehow even worse. Like the Shar-Pei, these people were bred for home protection, not only because, despite their looks, they are actually quite fearsome fighters, but also because all those flaps and folds look fucking terrifying. If you think this fucker looks weird, I can't wait for you to see the next abomination on the list. This is the Boar's Boy. The Boar's Boy was bred to have an exceptionally long snoot. Now, on a dog, that looks weird enough. Sock puppet ass dog. On a human, the facial structure was never designed for a snoot in the first place, so it looks absolutely horrific, but hilarious all at the same time. I was cursed with all these weird dog shits, and the fact that these stupid things exist, and now so are you. While these humans might look extremely different physically, like different breeds of dogs, they all have incredibly similar genetic profiles. The differences, while great, do not go to the point that these domesticated humans can no longer interbreed. You might say that no human would willingly subject themselves to this. I'm a big smart boy, and it wouldn't work on me. You forget, this isn't on an individual scale. It's on a generational scale. So imagine someone comes up to you and says, hey, you get free sex for life, and we'll feed you and give you whatever you want as long as you keep piping your really hot partner, and you two will be in love, and we can guarantee that we'll scientifically make that last forever. Is the first question you ask going to be, hey, what does this mean for my potential but yet non-existent future great-great-grandchildren? Or is it gonna be, where the fuck do I sign up? Successors are not inherently evil, but they also aren't good. Just like if you ask a human about dog breeding problems, every successor has a different opinion about what they did to humans. Some think it's an atrocity, and protest its very happening. Others breed humans with giant eyes and breathing problems to fund their coke habits. However, this was awkward when an advanced human society met the successors. The humans looked at the domestics and they were like, those poor people. The successors looked at the humans and they were like, those are the ugliest goddamn dogs I have ever seen in my entire life. Humanity has come into contact with a newly discovered form of sentient life, the yablins. These creatures are aliens. These goobers hop from one planet with sentient life to another, selling various types of intoxicants to the population. These substances, being alien in nature to the native population of the host planet, are entirely novel to them. It's often reported as the most intense high they've ever experienced. The yablins are a species of short, stout humanoid creatures that look similar to what humans have depicted in the movie Gremlins 2, which is one of the greatest movies of all time. And the original Gremlins, which is also one of the movies of all time. The vast majority of yablins that other sentient life interact with are drones, serving the upper echelon of the yablin hive with the sale of their products. As the dealer yablins are typically scrawnier and have sharper teeth and claws than the upper class yablins, which are quite fat and kinda look like those soggy hairless cats. One day I'm gonna get me one of them living testicle cats. These creatures are eusocial, and the organization of their Lovecraftian cartel is actually more similar to an incredibly complex anthill rather than a society of individuals with individual goals. If it gets you high, the yablins sell it, but what they're really famous for is the drug that their namesake comes from, yabble. Like floppy baby syndrome, this cartoonishly ridiculous-sounding thing is actually quite severe. Yabble is an incredibly addictive stimulant with deliriant properties, usually snorted but injected amongst the most hardcore of users. Yablins will aggressively push this drug to any customer, regardless of what they originally intended to purchase. If the customer continually returns to a yablin to purchase some sort of extraterrestrial intoxicant and refuses the yabble every time, it's quite common for yablins to lace their other drugs using yabble in order to attempt to get the user addicted. I don't want to sound specious here, but you really don't want to do business with this cartel. I know it's not all of them, but you'll be thanking me when you're not sucking celestial gremlin dick for some space meth. Symptoms of yabble intoxication vary widely depending on the dosage. You know what they say, take 1 Benadryl, get sleepy and less itchy. Take 15 and see the fucking Hat Man. These symptoms can include euphoria, dysphoria, elevated heart rate, paranoia, hyperfocus, low appetite, sexual arousal, hallucinations, mania, blurred vision, delirium, and psychosis. Deliriants are unique compared to other hallucinogens because they create true hallucinations, which are hallucinations indistinguishable from actual reality to the user. People will often use yabble to stay up for days, and in this heavy abuse, the drug goes from lightly to heavily hallucinogenic. These hallucinations become darker as the addict goes without sleeping for longer, and in combination with the poor decision-making that lack of sleep will also cause, a yabble binge user can easily endanger themselves or others. From someone who boofs embalming fluid, this shit is one-and-done addiction. Don't touch it. Where there are yablins, there is yabble. And where there is yabble, there is an incredibly high rate of drug-induced assault. Yabble-induced mania often takes the form of the user believing they are under threat by their hallucinations. Oftentimes, they hallucinate others they see as monstrous abominations. In all cases, this results in a fight-or-flight response. The cartel attempts to addict as much of the population of the native species as possible. In cases where the yabble addiction rate is over 75% of the population, the yablins will start to use their stranglehold over the drug supply as a bargaining chip to gain more and more control over the native species planet. Slowly but surely, they'll gain majority control of the planet's resources and addict almost the entire population of the sentient species to the drug. This one time I was hanging out with another species and I saw all this happen, but I was more concerned with putting those just add water, watch it grow animals into jars of pee. I think I used my time well. When they finally get complete control over the sentient species and the resources of the planet, they begin importing the raw materials for the yabble production and use the native species as a workforce in exchange for the fruits of their labor. After extended periods of yabble use, the individual can often lose their higher cognition. The yablins take advantage of this and breed the sentient species to be made to work until death solely for redoses of yabble. After the majority of the planet is in this condition, the yablins hyperpopulate, which basically just consists of goblin orgies, until their species is almost double the original population. Half the population leaves, promptly flipping up their middle fingers and flying the fuck off into space to screw over another species. If you like these nonsensical ramblings and want to see more, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe with all notifications enabled, or I'll put yabble in your town's local water supply. I'd like to thank my buddy, Dark Ranch 7, aka Wyatt, for drawing this critter. I also want to thank Biodegradable for editing this video. I want to shout out Dead Rex for making these spooky critters.
Shout out the inner circle. Love y'all. Okay, bye.